Hi, my name is Taylor. Welcome to our TBReaders Q&A for the Underdream with Aiyana Masla. My name is Taylor Mitnick. Like I said, I'll be the moderator today. I've been a TB fighter for 2 years, and I'm currently pursuing my nursing degree. Aiyana, we are so happy and excited to have you.
It's really
Aiyana is the
great.
author. Uh, like I said, Aiyana is the author of The Underdream, which was just published so recently this year, and the chapbook Stone Fruit, which was published in 2020. Her poems and art have been featured in numerous journals, collections, and anthologies. The Underdream was written while she was recovering from active tuberculosis and talks about health, beauty, pain, and survival. It's a brilliantly poignant collection of poems, and it is very touching. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. This is our first author talk with someone who has written and published about their experience with active TB, and our first book of poetry that we're discussing with the club. I have a list of questions here that were suggested and voted on by our community, and I'm excited to have a lovely conversation with you. One of our goals as TB fighters is to bring awareness and humanity to TB treatment, and this is something that your book of poems does beautifully. What compelled you to write this book?
Thank you. Thanks, Taylor. What an honor. Um, this book came out of in many ways, the slowing down that is required in dealing with acute illness allowed for some pretty deep listening for me. I took it on as um, poetry for me is really how we enter, and it's a way of paying attention. And poems just started to come through very quickly, actually, upon receiving diagnosis. In a way, they were record. In a way, they were record of both contraction and pain and difficulty, as well as moments of expansion within the limitations of being very, very sick. And um, I think that in particular, as the book started to take shape, which happened a few months into treatment, I I realized that the poems and the book were record of moments of clarity that were coming through around um, how deeply isolating long-term illness is, and yet it's a shared experience. So many of us encounter, all of us will encounter our mortality. We will all come into contact with illness in some form. And so many of us, um, especially as we age, will encounter long-term illness, pain, chronic symptoms, and the isolation that comes along with working with that in our society and in capitalism and um, in the conditions of our world and culture. And I wanted to extend from that isolation towards others. It's an invitation, an access point, if you will, um, to sort of enter this shared experience and um, the shared opportunity to break that isolation, actually. Yeah, poetry is a really beautiful way to communicate. So that compelled me to create a book and submit it a bazillion times until it was accepted for publication.
I mean, that's a wonderful reason. I definitely reading it, I felt some of that. Um, the it almost seemed to reach out and say, like, here, you're gonna feel this now. Which seems to be your intention. Um, did while you were sick, did it help to write, to process emotions or to like imagine that there imagine the world when you were better and publishing this book?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a very enthusiastic. I'm very enthusiastic about art and creative expression and artistic work as a way to survive hardship. Um, it became so clear to me that beauty and awe and wonder are how we navigate hardship. And um, there's many ways in which being an artist or being a poet or making creative work can feel inaccessible, um, can feel kind of elite. So I just want to clarify, I don't mean that it has to be traditional poetry or art. I think we survive by encountering beauty and moments of wonder and awe in infinite ways every day. You know, it can be what shirt you put on, it could be what you decide to cook, it could be noticing the way the light is coming in the window, or what you hang in your rear view mirror, or um, socks that you like, or um, a song that you love to sing in the shower, you know? But I do really feel strongly about beauty and wonder and awe as survival when we are encountering hardship. Um, there is a very long lineage of doing that in humanity. And for myself, um, I don't know how I would have gotten through this time without creative practices. Um, and because of the way that poems, in particular for me, um, the presence that they invoke, the acceptance of what is that they invoke, um, poetry was really, yeah, a central part of my treatment. Actually, it was central to my, it was a medicine alongside with the antibiotics. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I do feel like as you were saying that, it did remind me of especially the last chapter of your book, where like in Thaw, where you spent so long just writing down those moments of beauty and wonder and awe. Um, like the one that really stuck out to me in that section was A Spell for a Slower Life, which I think is just a, I found it a very touching and needed reminder to recognize the little good things that happen every day,
Mhm.
regardless of health status, regardless of um, who you are in the world and what you do. The grass is still growing and it is still beautiful. And I think that is something that, I don't know, it's a good reminder to slow down. Um, and I can absolutely see how that would be really restorative and healing.
Mm. Mhm.
Um,
And in many ways, it gave the ways I was being forced to slow down, just because of my capacity, it gave that a sense. It sounds sort of funny to say it because I'm not trying to make it sound like it needed to be productive, but it gave it a sense of purpose. I was like, oh, okay, there's a message here. There's some medicine here for the world. There's something I need to bring back from this experience, back to myself once I'm recovered and busy and full and, operating at a faster pace again. This needs to be brought back. Um, these poems could potentially touch a lot of people who are feeling in the spin of how fast our cultural pace is. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. How does that gratitude, um, what ways have you brought that forward with you into um, wellness, I guess?
I think that I feel that there is always an opportunity to um, find just a little bit more um, the way that I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way that poetry is listening and is paying attention and is in fact it's an opportunity to really notice the wisdom in the mundane or even in the pain or the challenge or the difficulty of the moment. Um, that to me is very, very connected to gratitude. Um, and gratitude, there's so much science out there about our thoughts and how they impact our health. And I think that there's a lot of prompting out of that science and out of my own experience to continue to practice. It's not always possible, but to continue to practice trying to notice um, and trying to have some um, stretch towards wonder and awe and beauty, as we were just speaking about. And that to me is gratitude practice, or it is
Yeah.
what's available there. Yeah.
And it definitely is a practice.
Yeah, it
Um,
is
I
sure.
noticed you use that and that it is a conscious habit, I feel. Um,
Yeah, it's a
and
training
yeah,
of
the positive
attention.
psych of it all. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, it is like a strengthening of attention, and yeah, awe is a muscle in a way that can be strengthened.
yeah.
Mhm.
And it definitely has an impact on health. Um,
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
we do a lot of study with the inverse, where stress will induce. I don't know. There's like stress induced cardiomyopathy, where that's you give yourself heart problems when if you're too stressed for too long. But the the inverse, where you have a gratitude practice, or you do spend conscious time, effort, and energy noticing wonder and positive things, does also have a equal and opposite effect often.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say this with certainty, but it is probable that stress is what caused my latent TB to become active. Um, I was a elementary school teacher in Brooklyn, New York City in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was extremely high stress. Um, and I would not at all be surprised to learn that that was related, the stress, the way that the stress, both the way that the stress weakened my system, making me more susceptible, but also the ways in which, just to speak sort of in a zoomed out, like meta level, my some wisdom in me was like, slow down. Like the stress is not sustainable at all. And I really do think there was just some central themes that needed to be communicated. They came in through a very difficult experience, but um, I'm not missing that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really trying to integrate much more awareness around stress as I recover and heal, um, which honestly is a very, very, very long process. It's been 2 years now since finishing my very long TB treatment, and I'm still physically recovering. It's a long process. Yeah.
This is a question from one of our readers on Discord. Um, and I feel like it ties in really well to this part of our discussion. Who supported you through your experience with tuberculosis, and what did it do that was most helpful?
Mm. Um, First and foremost, my wife, who at that point was not my wife, but because we made it through this experience, we really felt clear that we were to marry. Um, my partner, my beloved, that would be my first. I'm so, 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 so grateful that I had partnership through this experience. And I feel immensely, deeply blessed and grateful for community. Um, I was pretty blown away by the ways that friends showed up for me. And it was a very challenging time to support someone um, who was ill. I think this was pre-vaccine. People were isolating in pods, and at least in my community, not a lot of people were hanging out inside in the beginning of the pandemic. There were creative ways that people figured out how to support, including, meal trains and fundraisers, and I couldn't work, and um, yeah, long phone
Yeah.
calls. Um, yeah, and I got a lot of support from the natural world as well. So, I was living in the city, but there's the natural world. This planet is everywhere. The beautiful earth is everywhere. So, um, yeah, I got a lot of support from being outside as much as I could, sitting in the sun, which is so interesting because sanitariums, that's what they would do. They would have people sit in the sun outside, wrap them in a blanket on a mountain. I found it deeply healing and medicinal to just breathe in the fresh air and be with trees and be on the ground, like sit on the grass in the park or work in the garden. And I'm sure my book really reflects this, but I felt the accompaniment and the companionship of the natural world and all of the life on this planet um, that's alongside me in such a not complicated way and is always available in such a simple way to just be present with me and offer beauty, um, and offer an example of non-stressful presence. So that would be, yeah. Does that answer your question? Who and how
Yeah.
was it?
Yeah. I found it really interesting that you said accompaniment specifically,
Mhm.
because that is one of the big strategies for a lot of the organizations that we as TB fighters work with. Accompaniment through um, through trials, through illness,
Mhm.
um, is shown to really help healing and shown to really help um, people survive. And so I'm really glad that you're able to find accompaniment in your community, in your partner, and in the world. Um, I also imagine that it was very stressful having a respiratory illness during a respiratory pandemic. I'm sure
Indeed.
that was not easy.
I'm only laughing
What
because
else
it
can
was
you do sometimes?
like
Yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah. Those of us that were living through that were really in a specific condition. That context was very
yeah,
dramatic. Yeah, it
for
was very
sure.
dramatic. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like on one hand, you're like, cool, we know what your respiratory illness is. And then on the other hand, the healthcare system is just in such need for respiratory treatments and negative pressure rooms that's, I'm sure, was not easy.
It made it quite complicated. Yeah, thank you. And increase the isolation. I think had it not been the beginning of the pandemic, I probably would have felt a similar level of isolation at first, but then it would have eased up after my isolation period, and it just had to keep being isolation. Um, on the other hand, though, as I say that, folks were isolated everywhere. Whether they, there was a very specific context of having
Yeah,
a large hole in my lung. And there was a lot of isolation in our collective experience, and so there was creativity. People were using what we're doing right now of connecting on video much more than they ever had, and accessibility was increasing um, for those of us who couldn't, access. Yeah, it's actually very interesting. I'm
Yeah.
still sort of processing that piece, I think. What I was sharing with sort of the global experience while also having my own individual thread of a story. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very. That crux between accessibility and attainability
Yeah,
also, I'm sure
exactly.
was, especially if it was at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was
Mhm.
figuring things out,
Yeah,
including the
it was a
companies.
mess. It was a mess. It was such a mess. Yeah.
Is there anything about tuberculosis that you wish more people knew about,
Mm,
or that would have made
yes.
it easier for you if more people were familiar with?
Oh my gosh, yes. Just that tuberculosis is the world's leading infectious disease. I mean, I think most people that I encountered, um, who I would tell what was going on, were just so shocked, um, and so struck. And there's so much stigma still around it. So I think what you all are doing is incredible. I think um, TB advocacy is so needed, so necessary. Um, it's very sad how little awareness there is around it. If it hasn't touched you or someone close to you, many people feel like it's not something that will touch them or come close to them. And I was I was shocked at how shocked folks were. Um, so really just, yeah, I would love for people to know that it's so common and that it's an airborne and very, very global experience of it being a contagion. Um, I also think what comes to mind is that even my doctors and the wonderful nurses and everyone at the clinic who I worked with for almost 2 years um, didn't seem to fully understand how, and I know it's different for everyone and every body and every experience, but how long of a recovery from taking so many antibiotics for so long is. Um, Particularly for me, my gut health is just still just completely not well. So just understanding the very slow recovery of such a long treatment of thing. I mean, I'm so thankful for the antibiotics. That's how I survived. And they were so harsh on my system. And I was so exhausted and felt so horrible for so long. And I still suffer with capacity from it. And I think that the assumption was great. We found you a treatment plan that's working, back to work, back to life, and let's go. And so, yeah, I would love it if more people had more sensitivity and awareness of just how much it impacts one's life, physically as well as emotionally. And the complexity and the trauma that comes also slows us down and requires gentleness and time. And yeah, there's a way in which I felt like it was sort of compartmentalized, like, oh, okay, now you're on your treatment plan. Just come back if you have any flare-ups of, um, if you have any like more react. I had a lot of reactions to the meds. So if you are having more reactions, just call us, and otherwise we'll see you in a month. And it's like, it's such a bigger thing than that. So I guess on both,
Yes.
I wish there was more
Yeah.
awareness globally and particularly in predominantly resourced and privileged communities who might be more sheltered from it and yet are completely not at all sheltered from it because it's a world's leading infectious disease. And within the medical system, more bedside manner and also just sort of contemplation around how deep and complex and impactful it actually is as an
Yeah.
experience. Mhm.
I think it's really important to hear you say that.
Mhm.
Um, so a little context from me. Um, we learn about TB drugs in nursing school. And so far, we might go into it more, but so far, in my program, we've gone over the main ones and talked about their side effects and said, great, good. This one will turn your eyes orange, and this one will give you gout, and this one will absolutely destroy your liver. Oh, wait, that's all of them. Um, and we touch on, and these can have like long lasting systemic effects. And then we move on. And I
Yeah.
think having more care towards the social emotional and the like recovery time, as you're saying, um, a lot of times there's a lot of going from one dying person to the next and being like, great, you're stable, cool, next person.
Mhm.
And there's a long road of recovery for a lot of illnesses.
Yeah.
That is the real hard part.
Yeah.
Like once you're stabilized, now the hard part starts. Now
Yeah.
you have to do the rehabilitation. Um,
Precisely. Mhm.
mhm,
Yeah. And, that's not to say I have so much respect for what medical practitioners are doing. And I understand that there's a certain level of capacity and needing and pacing and I respect that. And what you're saying is so important. Even just acknowledging that to a patient can make such a big difference. So I know that this is going to be a long, you might want to look for some resources for nourishment and alternative forms of medicinal care to support your system.
mhm.
Here's a list. We have this printed list that we hand out to
Have
everyone.
some probiotics.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Mm.
I think it's especially difficult for diseases like tuberculosis, where they are so common and yet so rarely seen in this part of the world that every hospital has a negative pressure room, which is what you need for tuberculosis, but not every hospital is going to have a list of resources. Um, and I think
Mhm.
taking the time to create those sometimes, or just sit with your patient and say, hey, going back to that accompaniment, hey, I'm here
Mm.
with you. Let's do some research together. Let's
Yeah.
find let's find some recipes that'll taste good for TB and for everything else. Um, Sometimes that can help a lot, I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm in such a specific position as a, you know, white young adult who speaks English with a US passport and um, family and a partner and queer community. And, I had like so much resource and it was still the hardest thing I've ever been through. So I can only imagine what many, 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 many people are encountering who might not have the same access and resources and how much just a conversation like that could be so supportive. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, to that note,
Mhm.
uh, someone asked what strategies you use to talk about gratitude and um, your experience with TV without diminishing the struggles that come with it uh, in this country and in a lot of other places. We've touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask the question specifically in case you had a more specific answer.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, what comes up is that two things. What comes up is that consciousness and our awareness is always expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. And um, for me, poems and poetry and this book came as a way of um, kind of attuning to those moments of expansion and recording them. Um, you know, how, how like animated or vibrant joy can feel when we're in really acute, raw hardship or loss or difficulty. Like I'm thinking about times of like heartbreak or the death of a loved one or illness. Um, I feel much more access to tenderness and permeability. And so there really is this sort of breadth of capacity to also experience the expansion, the joy, the beauty, the love, um, and being so intimate with our fleeting and temporary aliveness has this real opportunity to sort of be intimate with all of aliveness, right, including gratitude. Um, and then in terms of how I wrote the book, the what helped me to honor what I felt for myself was to honor how much challenge and difficulty is inside of this experience, as well as this more joyful gratitude that I just spoke to, was to break the book up into sections and to really not skip over the moments of deep illness and at the same time not skip over the moments of alert um, attentiveness to beauty, and to try and really balance those in the structure of the book and how the poems, um, the choreography of the poems. So I hope it communicates that. But it was definitely a part of uh, scaffolding the collection. Mhm.
We do have a question about that scaffolding because it is the poems are very impactful, and the rhythm with which they are laid out in the book is also telling a story. But did you write the poems into that order, or did you sort them into it when you were done? And if you sorted it, um, were there any that you like struggled to place?
That's a cool question. Um, So the way that I wrote the collection was actually to write every day. I had a writing practice and I had a painting practice, and I tried to do them most days, even if I was really exhausted. Um, and then I started reading back and marking the gems and pulling them out and typing them up. And then once I have felt like most of the poems that were embedded in the pages had been typed up. I printed everything out and I laid it on the floor. And I spent a long time trying to order the storm. Um, and I really had my attention on what we were just talking about of wanting to honor the complexity and the breadth and the depth of the experience and tell a story. And so I would say I spent much more time editing the poems, revising the poems, and placing the poems in order than I did writing poems. Um, and there were definitely poems that were hard to place for sure, because um, it felt really important to hold the uh, what's the word? Like the spectrum of the experience. And to take the reader with me, it felt really important to bring the reader along, and try my best not to lose them. And I had to let go of some poems, and I was very grateful to have some early readers who helped shape the manuscript as well and give their feedback on the order as well as what poems to let go of. And one teacher is always saying if there are more than one. If a poem is saying the same thing as another poem, then you should cut it. So, yeah, trying to be really selective and discerning as well. Mhm.
Yeah, wonderful. It comes across. And I do, as someone who works with people who are sick, I do appreciate that it's not a clear, this happened, and then I was sick, and then I got better, and now everything's fine. And it
Mhm.
is more of a wave,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I think that's more true to form.
Mhm.
Recovery is
Yeah.
not linear ever.
Yeah, and it's my experience, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I'm someone who's navigated long-term chronic illness for a long time. I had chronic long-term Lyme disease for about 10 years and then the TB. And so while this book is very much about tuberculosis, it's also informed by navigating pain and illness and the mundane of daily life with chronic stuff and being in a temporary body and being faced with that truth in a very, very close and real way. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Got a couple questions about the layout. Um, a lot of poems in this book were written in the second person, speaking to an unidentified you. Was that you usually the same person in your mind or a variety?
Hmm. It was definitely a variety. Depends on the poem. Um, I would say the most common use of that pronoun you was myself quite acutely ill, speaking to and imagining myself um, in recovery or recovered or healed. And like I said earlier, making a record, um, communicating some truth or wisdom or insight or message from that alert place of being so intimate with death and mortality. Um, and I, really believe that we have to imagine and be able to imagine and vision um, a healing if it's going to happen. So some of those poems were that as well. Um, some of the you pronoun is speaking to the reader and wanting to bring them in close and wanting to invite them to share, as I spoke to earlier, to break that isolation and to share in um, and access a togetherness and accompaniment. Um, and then there are a few moments where the you is very specific. I'm speaking to my wife, I'm speaking to a friend, I'm speaking to my doctor or a nurse. I have one poem, Letter from My Left Arm, where I'm speaking to death. Um, that was really early on. I was had a lot of liver toxicity, and I was going in to get blood work every day, and it was really unclear how we were going to figure out. I didn't have drug resistance tuberculosis yet, but I was really struggling to get on a regimen and to figure something out that would work for my body and that my liver could tolerate. And so it was really scary, like 2 months ish. And I felt death's presence like very close because it felt very confusing. It was like, I have this disease and I can't figure out a treatment and I can't keep the medicine down, but I need to because I need to, and it was just a way of sort of like accounting my efforts to death, speaking directly. Um, yeah, and then there's um again, as I said earlier, there's the you that's me speaking to myself. Yeah. Yeah. As a way of sort of listening for anything that needed to come through to sort of poetry as this sort of like vehicle for communication. Yeah,
Do you find yourself reading back through these poems and listening to that voice now?
I certainly try. Yeah, that's a good question. I certainly try. I'm very grateful, actually, to myself for writing this book because I need these messages. Um, so there's some real wisdom in my past self towards my future self. It's been really incredible, actually. I'm giving all these readings as the book comes out, and each time I'm sort of faced with encountering wanting to bring forward one of these core themes and realizing that it's what I need to hear. And that's pretty beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. I do feel like your poems have a lot of wisdom in them. Um,
Thank
but
you.
I also imagine that it's might be painful at some points to read through them and remember how it felt to be sick and feel I don't know if you felt like the medicine was making you sicker, but that is something a lot of people feel with tuberculosis medications, especially because they are so harsh to the
Mhm.
body. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah, it
imagine there's a
is.
lot of
Yeah, for sure. And it's also very cathartic to be able to return there and connect from a different place. As well as the wisdom that you're pointing out. It feels important to name for me that it doesn't feel necessarily like it's mine, but that slowing down that much allowed it to come through from wherever it was this sort of like collective field that I was able to actually tune in and listen for some wisdom because of how slow I was going. Yeah, that it's just so much more accessible to have insights when we're able to slow down. Yeah.
yeah. Can you tell us, you use lines really specifically in this
Mhm.
book, in your poems, and spaces and space on the page. Can you tell us a little bit about your use of space?
Sure. Um, I won't get into a craft workshop, but I will say um, that I do a lot of reading poems as well as writing, and that I learn so much from reading other people's poems. And for me, I'm also a painter, and there is so much that can be communicated through the way the poem looks on the page. And many of my poems are actually written for the page and not to be read aloud necessarily. I mean, they can be read aloud, but it's important what they look like. And that's actually just as much of a choice as the words. Some of them are written in a very, I say this lovingly, but like in a very nerdy fashion of like each last line, last word of every line is making a poem. I mean, you can really get into it and it's fun for me. And line breaks play into that as well as so much gets communicated by space on the page, by what's unsaid, um, by what I edited out or chose to present as a shape. Um, yeah, there's a lot. I'm definitely a verbal processor in some sense, but I'm also very visual, and um, the experience of the auditory and the visual alongside each other is so important. So as I was editing the poems, I did a lot of um, reading it aloud. Sometimes I would record myself reading it aloud to hear what it actually sounded like. And then that would inform line breaks and commas or not commas, or use of other punctuation. Um, that would inform the structure. I sometimes would move away from a certain poetic form and into another because it wasn't communicating the emotive quality I wanted it to. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question without, me
Yeah, it
going on
does.
for too long, but
Are
okay. Yeah.
there, so you're talking to a bunch of nerds. Are there any poems that you want to highlight that are particularly nerdy or you had like a really great time writing because you could get in the nitty gritty and make a bunch of stuff to analyze and
That's such a fun question. Let's see. Certainly. I don't have one on the top of my head. There is, I'll just say generally that one game that I really enjoy playing is um, line breaks so that the first word of every line can also make a poem, or the last word of every line can also make a poem. So I'll just drop that clue without finding a specific in this moment. Yeah.
you're going to send a bunch of people down a rabbit hole, myself included, and I cannot wait. Uh,
I mean, it's up for interpretation.
yeah,
It's
it's
all poetry.
fun.
Yeah.
Little Easter eggs. Um, and more meaning.
Mm.
Are there any poems in this book that are meant to be heard, meant to be spoken?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, there are several poems that are ones that I feel very drawn to read at a reading versus several poems that I don't want to read aloud as much. So, yeah, one poem that I really feel drawn to read is Empty, Empty. It has just a lot of space on the page and is meant to be read very slowly. And the repetition of words are very intentional, and it's got a very rhythmic cadence. And it brings, I think, a real specific feeling. Another one that I feel is well read aloud is Reverence, with the drip, 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 and up the driveway and down the driveway. And yeah, there's just like a way that the sounds really make sense. Returned, which is the last poem in the book. I love reading that poem because it feels like I'm talking to you, like very casually and softly. And it's written that way. And that can be sweet, not said aloud on the page, but it's very beautiful to voice that. There's something very tender there. So yeah, everything from an expanse of like tone and sound to like style. Um, and honestly, any of these can be read out loud, but some are more designed for the page and some more to be read.
Well, you've given us homework in the best way.
Oh, that's
Now
fun.
we're gonna have to read them all.
That's fun.
Um, I know we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. So I want to just make sure we get to um, we've touched on a lot of these questions, which is great. I want to make sure that we get the ones because we had people submit questions, then we had people vote on them, and we put the top voted ones in
Mm.
this list, and I want to make sure that we get the ones that were
Of course, take your time.
voted highly. Um, what is your advice to those of us trying to support people with chronic illness? And what is
Mm.
your advice to those who have chronic illnesses?
Mm. I just want to appreciate you if you're trying to support someone with a chronic illness. Caretaking is really big, and it's often not seen. And yeah, it's really incredible. Um, I also want to appreciate you if you're navigating chronic illness, because that is often unseen labor and misunderstood labor. And I feel like we've already touched on what I would want to say to folks who are navigating chronic illness, in the sense of um, just reminding you that you can slow down, and it's beautiful to slow down, and there's so much wisdom, and there's so much opportunities for awe and wonder and gratitude and insight in navigating pain and sickness. It's like right there. Because we have this like special, we're like in a coven we have this like special magic um, that we have this secret insight into that the world operating at the pace that it's operating at kind of can often miss. Um, and that there's accompaniment in that. The natural world is slow that way. And others who are dealing with chronic illness and pain and sickness are alongside you, and that it's a shared experience, that it can feel so isolating, but it's not actually um, your singular experience. There's so much accompaniment, whether that's the natural world or others who are sharing this. And what would I say to those supporting other than thank you? Oh, there's something about forgiveness actually that comes up. Um, yeah, there's some level or layer of forgiveness in understanding that when someone has a limited capacity because of physical symptoms or exhaustion, it can feel all kinds of ways to have to cancel plans or to miss something or to need support or to need help with something. And for me, it's been incredibly helpful and incredibly healing when someone reminds me that and of their forgiveness and their understanding and their acceptance of where I'm at. Just like, yeah, I know you have a limited capacity. It's okay. That is not to be underestimated. Um, and this might be obvious, but I just really, really encourage caretakers and people taking care of to not forget about yourself because it's really exhausting. It's a lot of effort and emotional labor. And my experience with my partner was that if she was overly focused on my experience, then she wasn't tending to herself, then it would be harder, so much harder to show up for me if I needed it. Um, because there would be grumpiness, resentment, fatigue, burnout. So it can't be yeah, stated enough that how important it is to, you know, the heart pumps blood to itself first before anywhere else in the body, that kind of thing. It's cheesy and cliche for a reason because it's true. Yeah, that's what I would say for that.
A fabulous answer.
Thanks.
In an entirely different direction,
Sure.
what draws you to watercolor painting?
Oh, I love how I can't control it. Um, it's a specific medium in which I am in conversation with the paint and the water and the page. And there's so much spontaneity in it. Watercolor, if you've used it before, it definitely has rules and it definitely has technique and craft for sure. And things will happen for me that surprise me. And I have to be responsive. And then, I firmly believe that there are no mistakes. Um, and with watercolor painting, there's so many opportunities to practice that belief and to sort of work with what's occurring. And that really maps onto how I'm trying to live. Um, how I'm trying to practice not regretting or being harsh with myself when things go a different way than I intended, and how I'm practicing spontaneity and flow and responsiveness rather than reactivity. So watercolor is like a really fun and playful practice space for some neural pathways in my brain that I'm working to strengthen. Yeah.
To that note, when did you make the cover?
Um, Thank you. The cover came about once the book was published. And I made this painting. It's quite large. And I made it in a moment of thinking about the book and thinking about how it had been a year plus, probably like 14 or 15 months since I'd ended my treatment. And I really felt as if I was in a I've never tried to describe this painting, um, on a horizon, like in a moment of having pretty expansive vision, almost as if I was in a meadow or a field and it was sunrise, or there was just like a lot of illumination on the whole treatment process and the illness process and what was coming together with the book and what was coming in through. Um, and it also felt like something was trying to be expressed around a crack of light, the Leonard Cohen quote of the cracks are where the light gets in. Felt like there was something there with the themes in this book, um, that was trying to express itself through this painting as well, with cracks of light in difficulty and hardship, cracks of radiance, shining through these little moments. Um, so I think both of those very different things were being expressed in this painting, and it was winter, and it has that quality of like winter light for me, stormy winter light, which also feels apt, for the tone of the book. Like the book in many ways for me is, um, while it does track all the seasons, there is this consistent quality of a day in the winter time that is super cold and stormy and harsh and difficult to go outside and hard to breathe even, but there is that quality of like radiance that's shining off the snow that just makes you close your eyes and almost feel giddy because it's so bright. Yeah, that's the book for me, that energy.
That was a gorgeous description. I
Thank you, Taylor.
Yes,
Thank you.
I can feel that winter crisp light.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. What is your hope for the impact of this book?
Mm. I hope that this book can, as I said earlier, be an access point, be an invitation, um, into, um, what can often be a very isolating experience and something that we all encounter in different ways. Our mortality, um, the temporality of our bodies, um, a sense of, um, intimacy with death or illness. Um, as well as, um, I'm really asking readers to make contact with their own bodies and, um, but also the body of the planet and the bodies around them, bodies of water, other humans and animals and plants and stones and stars and gardens and pastures and mountains and fields. Um, yeah, it's really an invitation to connect and to be present and to slow down. And to me, I really want to break the isolation that can happen when we slow down and bring it into our collective experience, as well as invite us all into a little bit more, um, embodied sense of the nuance and the complexity that is slowing down, because it's not always pleasant to rest. It's not always enjoyable, somatically or, in our minds. Um, and I don't mean to make it sound like I think that's true. It can be very uncomfortable and painful, in fact, but that, um, that sort of way that that poems can invite us in to enter presence, as we spoke about. I hope that yeah, I can invite us all to slow down some and to really connect and be in the nuance and the complexity of what that actually means and see how that impacts our world and our relationships with ourselves and each other.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure and an honor to talk with you, and really grateful. Thank you.
I'm very grateful that you not only took the time to push this book into the world, but also took the time to talk about it with us. It's a very impactful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you also to everyone for being here, for being in the chat. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to check out our TBReaders book club by following the link in the description to the Discord or using the hashtag TBReaders on social media. Right now we're reading The Underdream, as we talked about for the last hour. And our next book will be The Black Angels by Maria Smilos. In some other exciting news, we're continuing our TB Ed talk series on this channel next week. Every month, we'll be sitting down with an expert in the TB world to talk about their area of expertise, followed by a live Q&A. We'll talk with advocates, doctors, researchers, survivors, and more about a wide range of topics. It is a chance to hear from people on the ground in the fight against TB. Our next talk will be with Dr. Carole Mitnick and be about LIBRE-TB, a pilot intervention to address post-TB lung disease. Ask questions in advance via the form in the description of this video or live in the chat during the talk. Tune in next Monday, October 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for the full discussion. To find out more about TBFighters and everything else we do, go to tbfighters.org or follow us on social media at TBFighters. My name is Taylor Meany. Our guest today was Aiyana Masla, the author of The Underdream, and you can find her on her website or on Instagram, and the links are in the description. Thank you again, Aiyana. Thank you to Melody for streaming, all of our mods, and all of you who attended. See you next time.